We're in.
We're in. Yes, thanks. Di got the teenage kicks. I don't quite see the. There's nobody teenage here.
Young at heart.
But
Young at
we're
heart.
live.
Young at heart.
Yeah. Right. Well, we're live with some of our esteemed Irish Freedom Party candidates. We've got myself, Dahi's here, who stood in Mayo. We've got John Bowler, who stood in Kerry, John, yeah. And we've also got Karen, who is our erstwhile secretary and basically part of one of the main cogs in the operation is right here. So we're going to just talk a little bit, follow on from last week where we talked about growing the party, the phenomenal growth of the party, as I mentioned. And we're going to talk a bit about the American election as well, and a wee bit about some of the immigration measures that were announced today, and maybe a bit about the COVID situation. But firstly, the Trump situation with John. Let me just introduce John. You're originally from the States, same as that. Yeah.
Yep.
John, just for those that don't know, just give a wee quick summary. You stood in Kerry, but you lived you ran a bar in America. Yeah. I
did. Yep. That's what made me feel so home in Ireland, is coming from the bar business.
Yeah. And you had a good experience in the election. You did quite well, and you come back to lend support to this country now. Yeah.
I did, and I also had background in politics in America. I had run for city. Well, I was city council member and mayor in a California beach town, and so I did that for 2 terms, which was 8 years. So this wasn't the first time I'd run for election. It wasn't my first rodeo, so that did give me a bit of a leg up.
So
but I haven't learned my head down, unfortunately.
You are?
I haven't learned to keep my head down.
Yes. What party was that for, John?
Actually, it was nonpartisan in our small town. So none of us had party affiliation. At the time, I was a registered Democrat going in and an independent coming out. Being exposed to the workings of democratic politics and the democratic machine from the inside soured me on that party, and I've never looked back on that.
See, a lot of us, it's funny that you said you were in the Democrats, because a lot of us, we've mentioned this last week, came at this from a kind of left-wing slant anyway, like Karen and myself. I'm not sure about you, Dahi. What's it briefly? You would never have been left wing, I can't imagine.
Oh, you'd be surprised. Yeah. But I'd say a bit about Chicago though, because I grew up. I spent a lot of time anyway in Chicago, and my dad was a working man. He was an electrician and a union fellow. So the idea we would have just been naturally considered ourselves to be along the Democratic line. But that's like I said, that's not my father's Democratic Party anymore. Those days are long gone. So.
They have changed, yeah. Yeah.
This is Chicago in the corrupt days. Different corruption.
Yeah. They've become a kind of a globalist party as opposed to the working man's party. I mean, the Republicans kind of look after the blue collar working man anyway, don't they?
Yeah, it's complicated.
They do now. That was the major change that came about because of Trump. Was go more for the working man. You were right. It used to be that the Democrats were the party of the working man and the unions and so forth. Yeah. But that's ancient history. Now they sold all that out to the far left. So, and the general working men were part of the Rust Belt. All their jobs were the ones that got sent over to China and whatnot. So, they were the lost generation of sorts, and Trump's victory was basically on reclaiming those people and giving them hope again.
Yeah. Although you could maybe argue that George Bush Jr. he was a bit of a guy. He was a guy that could have had a beer with him, you know. Whereas John Kerry was very Ivy League. He was a guy that was a bit sort of East Coast Ivy League, wasn't he? So the
George Bush was a monster.
He's a warmonger.
He was a
he was, but you could have had a beer with him.
He's a
my
nice
point is,
monster.
my point is, he appealed to the working man, though, more than John Kerry would have, his opponent at the time.
He would have had
Did Kerry actually win the vote?
more appeal, and he had that
He won the
Texas
vote,
boy kind of yowl sort of
yeah.
approachability.
Redneck.
But that whole family was, the history of the Bush family. That whole thing was horribly from top to bottom. So it was merely an illusion, but he could provide that illusion.
Yeah.
Whereas Kerry couldn't. He
was
Trump is a puppet to bankers. Part of the problem.
You can see that. Good.
Yeah.
Okay, we got comments coming in here. So Karen, you can see that,
yeah.
right? I mean, after George Bush Sr. died after he died a couple of years ago, they were saying that all this stuff was coming out about his drugs and the heroin and all that. Poppy Bush. I mean, was he as bad as 9/11, and his father as well, Prescott Bush. They were really saying that they were as corrupt as they could be. Yeah.
Yeah.
Before
Bush, they were tied in with the Nazis during World War II.
Yeah, there was a coup. His father tried a coup. Yeah.
So, are we seeing comments? Are we supposed to be seeing comments on here?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm just seeing one now. Yeah.
Yeah, there's one there. Somebody says Trump is just a puppet to the bankers. Part of the problem.
Well, they don't have proportional representative voting, so it's one or the other.
Yeah, the bankers. If they're puppets to the bankers are working their ass off to get him out. So it would seem counterintuitive. They're financing all the people trying to get him out.
This is true.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to talk a bit about Trump. I mean, he mentioned today, or there's this talk about the new judge, the High Court judge, Supreme Court. I mean, he made a comment. We talked about it briefly. He made a comment that there's going to be a woman there. I thought that was a bit strange. Is that not like discrimination? But you were explaining, John, that there's no men left in the race, yeah?
Well, no, it's not that there's none left. There are several still. Initially, he listed 20 possible candidates that he would draw from. And there were several men in that. And it's the same group that, I know I'm going to have a brain fart here. The last Supreme Court Justice, Kavanaugh, came from that same. Yeah, and these people all came out. There's a group of conservative lawyers and judges in America. The name of the group will again escape me for a minute, but in any case, they've recommended most all these people, and it's a conservative vetting organization. So if they've recommended them, they all certify, have all the bona fides of a conservative jurist. The thing, it's more than just the real politic of the situation. You saw what happened. I don't know how much they showed over here of the Kavanaugh hearings, but it was a real horror show of the Democrats coming after him with just lies, anything they could throw at him. I mean, it was just ludicrous. And so
made good TV though.
Pardon me?
It made good TV.
It did. It did that. Great entertainment. But so that you can anticipate that again, and men are going to be more vulnerable to that, the same way he was. They simply made up stuff and threw it at him that, from when he was in high school, and rape allegations and allegations of drugging women and mass rape, and just one thing after another. So there was that. Also, the fact that for a long time, the Supreme Court was an all-male institution, and it's within my lifetime that we've seen the first female jurist go on there. And so it's important to women to have a female voice on there, and women are the thing that Trump needs to draw more than anything else right now in terms of voting. All those become considerations. On top of that is, as I was saying, one of them who is a likely candidate was Hispanic. She's a Cuban American, and that draws both from Florida, which is a battleground state, and Trump is doing remarkably better all the time with the Hispanic vote, but this could put icing on the cake. All those things get you wouldn't think that those are considerations, but they all come into that in just the real politics. It's much like picking a vice presidential candidate. They're often picked for the area that they come from and the constituency that they represent and so forth. They're bringing something to the party when they're picked, and so that's a lot of what's going on here. If he tried to put in a man, it would draw a lot more heat than replacing a woman with a woman.
Yeah, although it did come across as a wee bit sort of prejudicial. He says it has to be a man, but anyway, I understand what you're saying.
I don't like the principle of it, but I understand the politics of it.
Yeah. Okay, something people might want to know about the system, though, because it's a 9-person. Where am I? I'm this way. It's a 9-person panel of judges, right? So right now they're kind of 4-4 because they've lost Ginsburg. So if there's a problem with the election on election day, and there has been in the past where I think was it Kerry where it actually ended up going to the Supreme Court to decide it. Right now they couldn't do it because they might be locked. So there would be no way to decide. So that's one of the reasons why the Democrats are doing what they're doing. They want to cause so much chaos and mess up the election so much that it can't be decided on the day. Right? So one of the reasons why Trump wants to push this through. Sorry?
I get the impression that this whole thing, the Black Lives Matter thing, has been raked up, really putting pressure on the COVID right on Trump, so that this could be a referendum on Black Lives Matter. What do you think?
I don't think so personally. It's because Black Lives Matter in the polling in America is a small percentage, and it's been dropping steadily because of the riots and the violence and the arson and all that. So they are more of a hindrance to the Democrats than that they are something that the Republicans need to cater to.
Right. So it kind of backfired on them, really.
It did, exactly.
Yeah.
The Antifa as well.
Yeah, but the whole movement, there's this thing at the minute, this guy's talking, he's this radical black agitator guy. He's saying he doesn't like Antifa involved in it, but he likes the fact, he likes the movement. It's like a paramilitary type movement. This new guy.
Yeah, there's a lot of tension in between those two groups. I mean, I suspect, although I have no factual outside of just assumptions, that they're both Soros-funded groups aimed at just disrupting all things having to do with America and the election. But they are Black Lives Matter doesn't like the fact that and it's interesting when you see Black Lives Matter demonstrations, probably 90% of the people you see demonstrating are white young women.
Yeah.
So they feel, some of the black people are complaining that they feel co-opted, that the black movement is mostly white-faced.
Yes, it's a wee bit like the time. It's a bit like the time we were attacked in Belfast by an assorted group of left-wing groups, but a lot of them were saying they weren't happy that Syria were involved. There was all sorts of groups, but they drew the line at when Syria were involved. Anyway,
can I just ask
Karen, I was wanting to ask you, what is your take on the whole Trump thing, being a woman or not?
Well, I mean, a woman shouldn't get I'm not really into, what do you call that? Get a woman
Identity
getting
politics.
a job for a woman. Do you know what I mean? It shouldn't be like that. I mean, the woman who has died recently has done a lot. She actually, I was told it the other day, she actually fought a case for a man who was, I'm not sure the details, but she fought a case for a man who wasn't treated well because he was a widower and he wasn't getting the same rights as a woman, which, I mean, she obviously wasn't into just women's rights. She was into rights for both genders. And that's fair enough. I mean, that's very important. And a woman shouldn't get a job because she's a woman anywhere. Gender quotas don't work. The right person gets the job. Now, I know what John is saying. Trump needs women. He hasn't really gotten a good record since he started his presidency a few years ago.
Although most white women voted for him, it was only the black women that didn't vote for him.
Yeah, yeah. Well, in white women, I mean, he
Well, it was
needs.
more, sorry, just to correct it was primarily his biggest block was white men without college education. That was the biggest block.
Yeah.
Women were not as big. I mean, there were a lot of crossover votings, and he did pull a lot of women, but not as many as you may have thought. There was room. There's a lot of room to develop that segment.
Right. Okay. So what does he need to do between now and November? I mean, I know he says some states are kind of like, the swing states. There's some states that are more I mean, I'm not really au fait with the system, but I mean,
Florida's
some
a
states
swing
that
state. He needs Florida.
Yeah,
he needs to get the Rust Belt and Florida, I think.
Well, there's a couple of these battleground states up in the north central, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Ohio. These are all what we call Rust Belt states. Pennsylvania is a big one, and that's really in play right now. The government. See, a lot of these things that he's having to contend with are places where the state government are controlled by Democrats, and so they're doing lots of things to mess with the mail-in voting. The other thing you need to realize is elections in America are by state. Each state controls its own laws regarding elections.
Yeah, compared to here,
The electoral college. Yeah.
Well, no. Separate from that, I'm saying that how you vote, where you vote, those things are controlled by each individual state for its own citizens. It has to conform in general to an American ideal. But for instance, now Pennsylvania is just trying to pass a law that your mail-in ballot doesn't have to be postmarked. A lot of games like that getting played, and they're being played by governors in the individual states.
Right.
So it's things like Florida is one of the battleground states. Texas is another. Ohio, Pennsylvania. These are all ones that are going to figure in heavily, much the same that did in 2016, that he either won or didn't win by a very narrow margin. Michigan is another big one.
Right.
So this goes back to why the Supreme Court is so important, though, is because all these laws that are being passed by these governors, like the law in Pennsylvania about the postmarks, or the fact that they'll say, oh, we may not have these all counted for 3 weeks or something after the election.
Delay the result.
Appealed to the Supreme Court. And that's why it's critical to have not a deadlocked 4-4 Supreme Court, why it's important to get someone elected before the election. And hopefully Trump wants somebody who's going to represent his point of view on that. But that's what's so critical about getting this done in a hurry, is you need to be able to get decisions out of the Supreme Court on these critical issues before the election takes place. So they may come out and say, no, that's all unconstitutional, and you can't do this, and you can't whatever, but it will clarify all this mess that the Dems have created. Or ideally, that will be what happens.
But if they didn't pick anybody, could I just ask, if they didn't pick anybody on the jury for the Supreme Court, surely the election shouldn't go through if there's nobody there to make sure that the Supreme Court is fully manned. I mean, it makes it null and not make it null and void, or I don't know. Is the Constitution strong enough?
I'm not sure I understood the question. I'm sorry.
Well, okay. I mean, every state is independent, but still they have to follow certain rules, despite the messing around.
Well, the whole thing is based on the Constitution and the interpretation of the Constitution. That's a key difference here. That's why Ginsburg was so critical. She was a progressive, and she saw the Constitution as a living document that was there to be interpreted and amended for contemporary times, whereas the conservative jurists are the conservative jurists say that you interpret it the way it was originally written and meant. And that's the dichotomy on that court between those who see it as a document that was sort of like the Ten Commandments. You don't, it's not meant to be interpreted. That's the way it came down. And others who see it as a living document that we'll make new law as we decide, so that, for instance, she was a big advocate of abortion and so forth. So she was willing to rewrite the Constitution to allow for that. So
Right.
that's why this is such a critical replacement, and why her death was so seminal to the court, because she was the most staunch advocate, and a damn good one. But she was an advocate as opposed to a justice, a judge. The judges are interpreting the law as it is presented to them. The advocates are trying to change the law to affect society going forward.
Right.
Dave, you want to come in there or something?
And the Democrats do want to wait. They want to wait it. They want to wait until after the election, if at all possible. So you could do it, but Trump says he's already got the votes. So there mightn't be
some interesting comments.
Yeah. So.
There's some interesting comments here. Paul is saying Trump moaned about being spied on, but he's introducing track and trace. He's pro-vaccinations, pro-mask, Trojan horse sort of thing, like a right-wing Trojan horse. What do you reckon?
David, you want weigh in on
I'd
that?
say I don't have to agree with him on everything. Yeah, Trump is pushing the vaccination. You hear him, he is.
That's what concerns me as well.
Yeah, yeah. But I don't have to agree with him on everything. He just has to be the lesser of two evils, So.
Yeah.
Also, you watch him on some of that stuff, and he will say something, and then do something else. What he will call the vaccination will turn out to be hydroxychloroquine with vitamin C, and that's both a preventative and a vaccination. So when it comes out, he may say, well, all these other people are out, Bill Gates and all those, promising to come up with these vaccines that aren't proven or aren't tested. But here we have this already tested, proven, FDA approved, ready to go. And that's what will end up being put out as a vaccine. But in the meantime, people look at that and go, wait. He's going to make mandatory vaccines? Now, A, it won't be mandatory. And B, I suspect the vaccine will end up, that he comes up with, will be the hydroxychloroquine. Remember, hydroxychloroquine.
And I think Fauci already came out and said it wouldn't be mandatory.
Pardon me?
He already said it won't be mandatory. I think he already said it won't.
That's what I thought too, but I didn't know if somebody was hearing something else.
Yeah, so there you go.
What about the argument that the whole lockdown is just trying to reset the economy to get it to bring in the new world order, that we're now going to be stuck at home from now on, and it's all fake? Are they overplaying their hand? Or yeah, in a word.
That's pretty much.
I certainly agree. Yes.
I mean, it's just too coordinated all over. Everybody's saying the same things. Everybody's doing the same thing. Just the time it looks like it's dropping off, all of a sudden we get the second wave. Although there's all kinds of new cases, but no new hospitalizations and no deaths. Blah 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 blah.
Yeah, it did look like there were some. I got the impression that the two doctors that came out in Britain, it looked like they almost were told to say that. It seemed to be very coordinated, and then all of a sudden, Boris Johnson's changing his direction. It looks like it's been kind of there's something going on behind there, doesn't it?
Well, you don't have to look to Britain. You can look at Ireland and see a lot of the same. Nothing is making sense, and it comes out of nowhere. And all of a sudden, something changes.
Yeah.
I even looking at Boris
what about
Johnson and the two ministers up in the north, all coordinated.
Because they're listening to the same people.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to step on you, but a lot of them are listening to the same people. So rather than the great New World Order thing, it might be just a case of people taking the same advice and a lot of groupthink going on and knowing where your bread is buttered. But I'm not quite so much for the grand narrative.
Well, I just posted something on Twitter today. I found a photo that I hadn't seen before. Was from 2015, and it's Barack Obama and Dr. Fauci and Michelle, Bill Gates' wife, Melinda Gates, all together in the Wuhan lab in China in 2015. Now, what a coincidence that all three of the primary people involved in that end up in the lab where it was created at, long before we were talking about any of this. It just isn't that ironic? You have to look at that and just what a surprise to run into you here. I had no idea you were going to be visiting the Wuhan lab at the same time I was. And then we all become players in the virus and all become players with Trump. It just too much stuff. That's a little tough to write that off as a coincidence. Just, what a coincidence that all three of the major players ended up there.
So you don't buy any of the argument. You don't buy the argument that the younger people might get it and not be symptomatic, and then pass it on to older parents and that, and then they'll die. So
no, that's true with any time there's a flu, every seasonal flu. It's the young people that do fine and the old people that die. The people are at 90 and 100 and have a number of conditions and are weakened and have weakened immune systems are normally the ones that die in those situations. It's the same thing that's happened now.
Yeah, and as John is saying, if your immune system goes up, it peaks in your 20s, as far as I know, and then it goes down steadily as you get older. So someone in their 90s, no matter how well they look after themselves, their immune system isn't as strong as someone, as our age group or maybe younger. So to expect them not just to stay alive a flu season is kind of unreasonable. If they make it, fine. I know a friend of mine whose grandfather is 91 and he got through this COVID, regardless, and he's still here. But other people may die of it. So I don't know why people are not getting this. Older people will die. I don't like the emotional blackmail they give out to you. Like, okay, your teenager might be out having fun with their friends, have a few drinks in a club or a house or a park, whatever. They go home to their parents or grandparents and they say, oh, you're putting them at risk. They were doing that last year. They're doing the year before.
Is this not more virulent? Is this not more virulent?
It's just a way of life. Sorry?
No. Is this not more virulent, though, as a virus?
I don't know that that's been proven. I don't know there's a lot of
virus
say those things, but is there any proof for that? Listen to Dolores.
The CDC. Yeah. Well, the Center for Disease Control in the States came out yesterday and said, actually, it's not airborne. So after all of the fuss, they're saying it's not airborne. Today in the Oireachtas, they heard from Swedish experts saying they don't know how it's spread. Right? And so they're talking about, basically it came down to Sweden and their herd immunity. And they let it spread around. And yes, they took a hit on old people. And I'm not for that. But they're just explaining that people don't know. And so there comes, at some point, you have to get some sort of a balance. Yes, older people should protect themselves. People who are very overweight should be very concerned. But everything can't shut down for this forever. So I don't know where we're taking it, but until they really know, what are we supposed to do? Like the balance of suicides and business losses and people's lives getting wrecked, older people should be taking great care of themselves right now. And the people close to them should probably be taking extra steps. But beyond that,
remember what they did in New York, where they took the active COVID cases and put them into nursing homes with all the elderly and spiked the crap out of the deaths, and thousands of people died. But it was obviously a deliberate ploy to drive up the death numbers. And they're starting to do investigations into Governor Cuomo and things, and there was 3 or 4 other governors right in that same region who did similar things. And
our own will have some questions to answer too.
I absolutely agree.
So, and that's one reason why they won't be able to back down too quickly and say they did everything wrong. So they'll have to be covering their back now to make sure things look dangerous as well. Hello, Karen. That Coca-Cola does more damage to your body than COVID.
Stop drinking that Coca-Cola.
No
work on that. Yeah.
It'll turn your insides brown.
Before we move on,
I take antibiotics by the dram.
By the gram?
Do you?
Dram.
Quick prediction. Do you think Trump is going to win?
Much better than Coca-Cola for you, and it kills off all those germs, disinfects you. It's not,
Stop
you know,
drinking
that
that.
John, only the good
your
die
hands
young.
everywhere.
Only
That's
the good die
alcohol,
young.
you know, and there's a reason for that.
I can't hear what.
I mean, stop drinking Coca-Cola, but any sort of cola is bad for you, Karen. Pepsi Cola is not much better.
No, I know that. It's very rare I drink Coke, but there was nothing else around at the time. So,
Right. Right, listen, before we move on to another topic, who do you think is going to win the election? Dahi, who's first?
I don't know, and I won't say. I really don't. I have my hopes on Trump. I'll say I
Come
want
on,
Trump,
no,
but there's too many variables.
yeah.
you hope it's not Trump.
I hope it is Trump.
Right.
I do want Trump to win.
Right.
Yeah, no doubt.
Right. Okay.
No doubt at all.
John, who do you hope or think is going to win it?
I'm sure Trump's going to win it in a landslide.
Yeah.
Really?
I put a bet on a friend a few years ago that it would be Trump. I thought Trump was going to be a shoe. And Karen, what do you think?
I don't like either, but I think Trump probably the best out of the two. I don't want Biden in there too at all. So, I mean, a bit like last time with Hillary. You know, I mean, we didn't want Hillary either, so we don't have much of it. They don't much of a choice, really, do they?
We don't have any choice.
No.
Do you vote, Dahi? Do you vote in the American election?
No, it's not my country.
No. All right.
No.
Okay.
I got to do it.
I haven't even been to the States.
Votes,
I haven't been to the States in over 30 years.
You haven't lost the accent.
What can I do?
Yeah.
We're moving on from that topic onto a bit of good old-fashioned discussion on immigration. we haven't. Yeah, something non-controversial. There was news today about the EU have a new thing out about this migration. They're trying to get to grips with this. Gull and Gleckfish. Are they tightening it up?
Well, it's documented.
Is that any way good?
This has to be approved. And there are a few countries, obviously Hungary and Austria and other countries are going to oppose this. So it might not go through anyway. But yeah, they have a new document out. This is the plan they'd like to have. You know, I mean, it's supposed, the big thing for people like us is that they want mandatory distribution of what they're going to call refugees, migrants / asylum seekers, whatever word they want to use these days. They seem to mix them up. But that's the big thing that'll count for us. They say they want to tighten the borders, right? And they want quicker adjudication, quicker processing of these people, right? And they do actually want more investment, say, in Africa to prevent people from coming. So that's good news. But the big problem is the mandatory. Pepsi is just bad.
Well, no, have they not said it's more voluntary? Have they not said it's more voluntary rather than enforced quotas? Have they not said it's to encourage people?
No, they want mandatory quotas. That's what they want.
They want. I thought they'd said. Maybe I read it wrong.
No.
I thought they'd said they have mandatory, but right. I've read.
But it's not working. They want to enforce it. In other words, they want to force Hungary into it. You know, basically, Hungary, Italy, all these people, and us. We'd have no choice anymore of saying, "Well, we want to take some," which I don't like at all. You know, so. So yeah.
I mean, Hungary have been very good at pushing back, haven't they? And Hungary have been very good at pushing back, and I imagine they would continuously do that.
Yeah,
you know, but I mean, England only have a couple of more months before they can close the borders. And I mean, I'm following Nigel Farage's commentaries and videos, and 26 boats brought in. There's more than 26 boats after coming in the last couple of days. I mean, they're still doing it right until the 21st of December. You know, and they're going into hotels and they're going into places, and that's uncontrolled, and the government is not doing anything, and our government is not going to do anything either. So we really shouldn't be. I don't like the idea of mandatory at all. It gives us a stronger argument about getting out of Europe as well.
Well, yes, that's true too. Yeah.
I mean, we've talked a lot about this. We've talked a lot about this. About it's not about altruism. It's about repopulating. It's about
absolutely.
It's nothing to do with charity. Not about caring.
Yeah, because
well, hang on. Sorry, let me just throw out a quick one. Little quick stat. The same amount of money. I mean, this is kind of my pet peeve thing. But if you have a refugee, if you bring them to Germany, it will cost 30,000 to do the same thing that it would cost 3,000 in Jordan. So if we do that with all of these people, so like we're not spending the money as wisely as we could. Even if you do want to help them, it would be much better spent in Africa than bringing them to Europe. It costs about 250,000 euro to raise a child in Ireland through third level education. This is insane for bringing in people by their hundreds and maybe more, which is what the EU wants to do. If you want to help, bringing them here doesn't make any sense. If you have an agenda of repopulating this island with people not from here, then it makes perfect sense. But otherwise, it doesn't. Just purely by altruism, by finances, it makes no sense to bring these people here.
Yeah. I mean, we're actually the party that's advocating. Really, our idea would help far more. So we're the party that actually wants to help. Because keeping them in their own country in situ would be far more beneficial. You'd help 10 times as many. John, what do you think about it?
Well, I'm in absolute agreement. But the point being, it's not just the financial part. It's that we can only take so many thousand whatever people that they're going to bring out of, say, Tanzania, just a random name. And they might bring 500 or 1,000 or 5,000 Tanzanians up. And of course, then they have to go through all the difficulty of adapting to a new culture, learning new languages, all those things to take the benefit, where we could send Irish advisors and see if we can't make Tanzania a more sustainable country, and some of our farmers showing them how to grow crops better and this, that, and the other, and improve Tanzania as opposed to make Ireland suffer simply in an effort to virtue signal and morally preening to the rest of the world and having no effect. We don't care that they're miserable and stuck in a country they don't understand, with a culture they don't like or don't understand.
And religion and everything else. Yeah.
And they barely had a choice in it either. They didn't pick Ireland. They were sent here. Just, okay, you 5 are going to Ireland, you 5 are going to Spain. No consideration whatsoever with them, for either the country and its culture or the people and their cultures.
But the genuine,
just to get a sense of the scale of it. Wait a minute. There are about 70 million refugees. There are 70 million refugees at this stage, right?
How do they define refugee?
Well, but if you've fled due to, you have to actually go through a process to get the status of refugee. Someone who just leaves isn't a refugee; they're an asylum seeker. But once you've proven your case, you're officially a refugee, right? So there are officially about 70 million refugees out there in the big world. The vast majority of those, around 73%, are living in the country immediately next to the country they've fled, right? So most of these people would prefer to go home if they could. And if not, they'd prefer to stay as close as possible. But it is completely understandable, if they're in a terrible, terrible situation, that they would go anywhere to avoid that. And that's where our money comes into it. What are we going to do with the money we have for this operation? Just the flights alone of bringing these people here would build a village in some of these places. So like the cost involved is just ridiculous. So it leads you to think that it has nothing to do with helping people. Right? That's where I go with it.
Yeah. Well, my fear about what's happening in the UK will start coming over here, because they'll see us as another freebie. And we need to stop the policies that encourage that kind of freebie mindset. Like they're getting the free, the money and the direct provision centre, they're getting free education, and they're getting, housing. We need to stop all of that, because that attracts the refugees. They're not refugees, not like some of them are. Some are running from really bad places, but a lot of them aren't. Sure. And if you see all the men who are coming into England, they're all young men, healthy men. There's nothing wrong with them. They're just coming into a country they know they're going to get a good life in. And we need to make sure that they don't come in here. And they're not with women, they're not with their sisters, their mothers, their girlfriends, their wives, their kids. They're coming in as young men between 18 and 30. And if you listen to Nigel, that's the problem here. And it's happening here as well. So they're coming into a country that's rich, according to them, and they know they're going to get a good package, if I want for a better word. So when England closes its doors in December, January, we're going to get it then. We're going to get more of it, and that's the problem. And we need to kind of get rid of that. So if we got into government, we need to get rid of all this mindset to stop the policies of getting the freebie, that package, that lifestyle, that new, how do you say, want of a golden egg or golden lifestyle that they won't get in their own country. And that's what's attracting
the rules were written at a very different stage of what a refugee was. We weren't talking about millions of people running around. When the Dublin Agreement was put forward, it was the occasional person that was coming through. It wasn't supposed to take care of the third world generally. That wasn't the idea. They're also talking now about climate refugees. I mean, once we get into that, that's just about everybody, isn't it? So we're kind of doomed if we're that generous. At some point, common sense is going to have to kick in on this. This idea of just wanting to be whatever this version of nice is. We are already in debt, an extra 28 billion this year because of COVID. Where are we getting the money to take care of all these people? We're borrowing it. So it's all nonsense at this stage.
We don't have the money to take care of us.
Yeah. Our infrastructure is falling apart.
But this goes back two things. One is, remember that right now there is less war in the world daily. Everything is being rolled back. They're talking about having all the troops out of Afghanistan by, January 2021, something like that. They're pulling the troops out of Syria. They're pulling the troops out of Iraq. All these conflicts that generated supposedly all these refugees are winding down, and yet they're trying to increase the number that they're bringing in. Now, I saw an interesting article the other day on Syria. All these Syrian men that came over with no daughters, no family, no children, nothing else. Syria is now pretty much at peace in about 90% of the country. And they're trying to rebuild it. And do you know who's doing the rebuilding and the construction? Those mothers and the daughters and the sisters. And they're saying, please send these men back. We need them here.
Exactly,
we're trying to rebuild our country, and they're all sitting over in Ireland complaining about Wi-Fi reception. And that's another. These poor refugees come in with iPhones, Nike sneakers, healthy.
Life jackets.
These are not your classic refugees by any definition.
Yes, I know.
And this all comes down to what we are about, which is sovereignty. The nation, we as a people of Ireland should decide who comes into our country. Not the UN, not the EU, none of those. If we are a sovereign nation and we are able to control our own people and our own laws, then nobody else should be sending people in. If we feel that the right thing to do is to take Iraqis, whatever, pick your neighbor, and they're having a problem and we want to bring them in. Now, a lot of people in a lot of these situations, they'll say, we will bring you in here and do what we can to take care of you until the situation in your homeland changes and it's safe again. Once it's safe again, you should return back there and live in your own culture and your own country and so forth. So that's, to me, it's about the sovereignty, and we need to be having this discussion, and we can decide what's right for Ireland, not Merkel.
And I know Cottle came up with an idea there probably about a month ago, and he's saying if you do come over, you're only allowed to work a certain amount of time, so maybe 5 years, and it stops this thing of say for instance a couple come over and they have a family, and then they get established in the community. Because what will happen is that they're getting established in the community, they're getting deported, and there's a big kind of emotional blackmail going on. Oh, you can't get rid of their family. Yeah. They're here, they're in school, they're working.
The children.
Yeah, exactly, and the GAA and all that kind of stuff. I'm sorry, but if they come over here and if you're only allowed them to be over here for 5 years, they come over from a country that probably is at war, they go back. I'm sorry, but they do go back. I mean, we may go back. And if Syria's out of trouble, in a few years' time, and they need them, they should go back. That's as simple as that. It stops that nonsense about, emotional blackmail and the community saying, running around because the child is at school and he's in, his older friends. It might seem it's too strong of a pull.
What about the idea that what about the idea that with all the COVID thing and the pubs not being open and everybody's covering up, that it's kind of bringing in Islam by the back door?
For the
I
pubs
think
being
there's
closed.
all sorts of levels of that happening, and not just this, but that is certainly a contributing factor, you know?
Yeah.
Masks and no
I mean,
pubs. We're already done for.
Yeah. It's beginning to look like Islamic already, you know. I mean, Karen, you were saying that they're making women's clothes with a built-in mask.
Yes, that's true. They're making them. I work in a hospital, and we have contractors that work in the hospital. And one of the managers that runs the shop, she wears a dress, and the mask is part of the dress, and it's matching.
Yeah.
So if it's red or black or whatever, it's matching.
Yeah.
And they're making these dresses to reflect the way they want it to go. And you're seeing more longer dresses. You're seeing more. You're seeing a change in the fashion of women, and like
modest wear.
Modest wear. What?
Modest
wear.
Yeah, it
is.
Modest wear. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it is. I said this to Carl only about a month ago. It is another way. It's conditioning in the back door of wearing a mask, even though men are wearing the two. It's conditioning to cover up. It's nothing to do with your health. None of this is nothing to do. We all know this already. It's nothing to do with your health, because if you're wearing a mask and say I don't wash my hands and I go and I touch something like a bar of chocolate or a cup of coffee or whatever, and you touch that as well, you're going to pick it up for me anyway. It doesn't matter whether I'm wearing a mask or not. So it's nothing to do with your health. And I mean, we're seeing it everywhere, that people kind of are people policing, each other. So the government doesn't even have to do it. So people are policing each other and saying, okay, you're not wearing a mask. I already had it a couple of times myself personally. You're not wearing a mask. As if that's something to do, as if you're doing something bad. If we're all responsible for our own health by matching our, looking after our own immunity, we'd actually fare it better. And yes, wash your hands every time you prepare for food, going to the toilet, eating food. Then you can actually stop the spread of the disease or any other flu. We're coming into flu season anyway. So if we wash our hands, we're reasonable. Herd immunity is actually a way forward. If we kind of just mix normally with each other. Yes, some people might get a cold, but they're not going to all die from this. People who are older, who have an underlying condition, yes, they may get sicker. They may not recover. But that's a natural way of life. It happens every year. What we see in Crumlin Hospital, we see babies with bronchiolitis or RSV. They don't die from it. But it happens every year, naturally. Influenza B and A and norovirus, all these things happen naturally, depending on the time of year. So what they're going to do is they're going to be pushing the COVID, they're going to be pushing the flu vaccine the whole time. So I don't know. Sweden are doing the right thing. They let it happen naturally. And our government has been told,
well, they're
ignoring it.
Yeah. I mean, DT is asking there, can somebody please tell me if a gorilla is able to get coronavirus? Is that not discrimination?
Why is he feeling left
out? On the subject of the Islamization and the cultural appropriation things, I have a modest proposal on that, because he's already laughing at my modest proposals. To me, it seems like if they're saying that we need to accommodate people's cultures and so forth, which seems to be fine in principle, but I think it should be reciprocal for it to be fair.
Yes,
so I think for every mosque that we open in Ireland, there should be an Irish pub open in Mecca. It's simple. I mean, if we are to accommodate their culture, then there's no reason why they shouldn't be able to accommodate ours. If it's a one-way street, then they need to explain that.
Yeah.
Well, it's probably not going to happen.
There aren't any.
But you wouldn't see any.
We haven't asked yet. We haven't asked
in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
I mean, if I went over as a woman to that a Muslim country, I'd have to cover up. I'd have to be with a man of family, not with another man, of stranger. And I could drive. That's changing for women over there. But I wouldn't be allowed to go. I mean, there's not too many Christian churches over there. So we wouldn't be allowed to do the things. They don't reciprocate our cultures, but yet they impose it on us. And while we're not the same or as bad as is going on in England, it is a way forward. And I said this only last week. What happened in Crow Park 2 months ago is a door that should never have been open. And I'm afraid that could happen again. Not exactly overnight, but it'll happen every year. That it's just a normal thing that any of our Irish grounds is allowed to be used for any of these Muslim ceremonies. And
he was already asking about coming back.
Sorry?
The guy who started that, the guy who organized that, they were already talking about coming back next year.
Yeah, that's exactly my
before
point.
it happened. So it is,
yes,
it is
the game there.
Yep, sure.
Yeah. And we're thinking about having. We've got a big banner set up now saying Ireland is not for sale, and Ireland is no one's colony. So we're planning a big protest in Louth, hopefully this weekend. So any of you guys want to pop along to Louth, I'll put comments up in the private messages after where we're going to meet up. So we're hoping to get as many people out and about. It could be a big spectacle. It could be a good event. We're going to get a big, massive banner and people about. Myself, Karen, and all the local gang. That right?
Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah.
Hopefully. I'll try and do a leaflet.
I'd like you to hop over to Kerry one of these times too. You know, I mean, it's that just hop over to Louth is a nice about half the country. You know, let's hop over to the west some of these times.
You think we should, Carl?
It's a small county. What?
Huh?
It's a small county. It's a small county.
Small country.
You might remember.
What?
Louth is the smallest county.
Sorry? Smallest. Yeah. Unlew, Cundy and Lew is the smallest county in Ireland, yeah. But with the nicest people.
Oh, I'm not arguing that at all. My family came from there, some of them. So I got no complaints on that. But if it's simply smallness that qualifies.
Right.
I'd love to bring you out here and have you get you out in the wild Atlantic way and relaxed and a pint in your hand and you'll never go home.
Yeah, we'll go, yeah.
More bloody
the context of that. The context of the protest is based on the 500,000 to 1 million people. They're talking about bringing in the brand new city, and Louth's been earmarked for it. So that's the context for that. Some other places said they want the city. No, we want that city in Louth. Give us some of the protest. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Any other comments?
Wait.
I think we've covered.
Wait. I want to do a plug. I'm hoping everybody will go out and buy Van Morrison's new tunes.
Good plan.
Yeah. Van Morrison has a couple of protest songs out.
Yeah, I mentioned that last week.
The radio stations will have to play it, right? And so that's a good thing for us. He gets the message out there. And if they don't play it, then they're going to have to explain why they're not playing it. So either way, on the 25th, I think the first one is Born to Be Free. It's on the 25th. So if we can push him to number one, make Van number one, man.
Yeah, and if people just call those request hotlines, and if everybody's calling up to request it, they're going to have to explain why they're not playing it.
Yeah, and it doesn't take much to get to number one in Ireland. It's not that many sales. So spend the euro, for God's sake. Make Van number one. Make the old guy happy. He's grouchy anyway, So.
We'll bring along our Van Morrison records at the weekend, for the protest.
Have a moon dance.
There we go.
It's a marvelous night, All right, guys. Look, anyway, we're going in the right direction. We're doing our best, and we have a lot of work to do. But I think with everybody's help, we can get there. Unless anybody's anything else to say, I'll maybe wrap that up there, guys. All right. Anybody
Well,
happy?
one
Don't
thing
be
just-
impatient. It's going to take a while.
Yeah. John, you were saying?
Anybody's out there.
I just wanted to thank everybody who did come in tonight and contributed and were making the comments and all. Thank you so much for showing up and for giving the input, because we are a party that thrives on the input from the people, not the other way around. So we hope to see you again and see more of this, and we do more of these. And thank you for taking the time to come by.
Yeah, we'll try and get another one going maybe in a couple of weeks, guys. Yeah.
Sure.
I'll be putting this up online as well. Okay, so good you and Kate or Ella. Slán card, just slán go fáil.
Slán go fáil. Good night.
Where's my camera?
Here,